Matthew chapter 27 is the powerful account of the crucifixion of Jesus. And as you read this, I encourage you to pay attention to the fact that Jesus is God and he's all powerful, and yet he keeps his mouth shut. He could have destroyed everyone who was crucifying him, but he chose not to because he knew his mission, and his mission was to die for the sins of the world. Later on, we're going to see he raises from the dead. But in this chapter, we're going to see how the crucifixion happened and how painful it was. Now, the chapter starts off with Judas realizing what he had done, feeling remorseful, giving back the blood money, and then eventually, sadly, hanging himself. But then we move on to Jesus' trial before Pilate. And Pilate was the Roman governor. So in the previous chapter, we looked at Jesus going before the Jewish authorities, the religious authorities. And now he goes before the civil authorities because, of course, Rome was in charge at the time. And Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus responded, "Yes, you've said it." And it says in verse 12, "But when the leading priests and the elders made their accusations against Jesus, he remained silent." And Pilate said, "Don't you hear all these charges that they're bringing against you?" But Jesus made no response to any of the charges, much to the governor's surprise. And this reminds us of the prophecy in Isaiah where it says that Jesus would be led before his accusers, but he would keep his mouth shut. And in the next section, the soldiers mock Jesus as they're getting ready to crucify him. They humiliated him. They beat him. And Jesus, again, just kept his mouth shut, didn't defend himself or say a thing. And then we move on to the crucifixion itself at the place called Golgotha. And then in verse 42, we see the priests and religious leaders mocking Jesus at the foot of the cross. They said, "He saved others, but he can't save himself. So he's the king of Israel, is he? Let him come down from the cross right now, and we will believe him." But he didn't do a thing. Can you imagine how Jesus must have felt? He had the power to do something. He was God, but he chose not to. And then verse 46 says, at about 3 o'clock, Jesus called out with a loud voice, my God, why have you abandoned me?" Now, by the way, so much of this chapter is prophesied in Psalm chapter 22. So you should go back and read that also, even as you read Matthew chapter 27. Now, the chapter ends with Jesus getting crucified. He's buried, and then guards are posted at the tomb. And that's how Matthew chapter 27 ends. But as you read it, I challenge you to read it slowly and even to read it prayerfully, because after all, this is historical truth. And this is one of the most important moments in your life and my life. If you've trusted Jesus for your salvation, well, this is the whole reason you're saved, because Jesus took your sins and my sins upon the cross, and he died there. Now, to learn more about that, be sure to take our Foundation series. And in the first lesson, we talk about how we start a relationship with God by trusting in Jesus, trusting that he's God, that he went to the cross, he died there for your sins and mine, and he rose from the dead.